let me introduce myself. My name is Jean-Claude Benitah. In most of my career has been in the engineering field. I have an engineering degree from McGill University in Montreal and a master's degree in computer engineering at the University of Michigan in the US. So most of my career has been involved in basically engineering and mostly electronics and computer engineering. I also have some experience in teaching. I've been teaching at Vanier College for 10 years, and I taught again the engineering field, in the engineering field. After I retired from Vanier, I joined AMI-Quebec, and I've been a member of the board of AMI-Quebec for about 10 years. I'm a chairman of the Advocacy committee, and I have also been president of AMI-Quebec for 2 years, from June 2013 to June 2015. Presently, I am what they call the immediate past president. Right. I also want to mention that I happen to be the father of a person who is suffering from schizophrenia, and he's been suffering from schizophrenia since 1992. So I have, unfortunately, a lot of experience in this area. So that's my background. Before I start, I just want to make a little disclaimer. As you can see, most of my experience is in the engineering field, so I'm not a lawyer or I'm not a financial advisor. The goal of my presentation is to give you some general information only, and that will hopefully facilitate your application for obtaining the eligibility to the disability tax credit from the federal government. If any one of you needs a professional advice for details specific to your case, then you will have to talk to either a financial advisor, a tax specialist, a lawyer, or a notary for either legal or financial questions. This being said, let me start the presentation. Here's the outline. Basically, I'll give you a brief introduction. Then we will talk about 3 federal government programs. The RDSP program, the Registered Disability Savings Plan. We'll talk about testamentary trusts, and I'll explain to you what they are in case you're not familiar with them. And those testamentary trusts supposedly taxed at progressive rates, and I'll explain that also later on. And the third one is basically how to reduce taxes in case the person with the disability happens to be working either part-time or full-time, or in case he has some form of a revenue for which he needs to pay income tax. And having the disability tax credit will permit him or her to reduce the income taxes. And finally, we'll talk about the actual reason why we are here, the disability tax credit, how to obtain it, and how to become eligible. Before I start again, I have divided the presentation into 2 parts. The first part is what I'm going to be presenting to you through the PowerPoint presentation, and then there will be a question period at the end. So if you have any questions while I'm talking, please write them down on a piece of paper and wait for the question period before you'll be asked to participate. All right. So this is the introduction. Reason for the initiative. Why did we essentially make this presentation? At AMI-Quebec, we had a number of complaints from family members who had a lot of difficulty trying to obtain the eligibility for the federal government tax credit. A number of them actually were turned down for reasons which we could not understand. So we wanted to explore this area and see what solutions we could find to this problem. One of the main reasons why some of the people were turned down in their application for the tax credit was the complexity of the form, the T2201 form. And again, we felt that understanding this form was really an important part of the whole process. Also, in 2013, the federal government decided to make some changes in their laws regarding testamentary trusts taxed at progressive rates. I will go over that in more detail later on, but what I can tell you now is that a number of people were using those tools, the testamentary trust, as a tax loophole, and that was the reason why the government decided that there should be no more progressive rates for testamentary trusts. We didn't like that as well. A number of members of AMI-Quebec complained, and we also felt that that was another area where we had to do something. We also noticed that not too many members of AMI-Quebec were familiar with the Registered Disability Savings Plan, the RDSP plan that is available from the federal government. This is a very nice plan, and that produces a lot of possibility of money that the federal government is willing to deposit on the plan. So we will talk about this today. Okay, the history of the initiative. Well, what we decided at AMI-Quebec was to revive our political action committee, and we decided to do that in 2014. It's not called a political action committee anymore, it's called Advocacy committee, but it's the same thing. And we were tasked by the board of AMI-Quebec to find solutions to all the issues I just mentioned. The federal government is presently aware, or was aware, that we were having some problems with the process for getting disability tax credit. And they had agreed to do something. In fact, they came to Montreal early this year for a presentation where they invited a number of organizations to participate and explain why they were having a problem with the whole process. We sent a representative there, and we were told that they were going to try to do something about it. So as a result, we decided not to pressure the civil servants on the process, and we wanted to wait until we'll see how improved the process would be. So instead, what we have decided is to make to use a step-by-step video that demonstrates how to become eligible to the disability tax credit, and as a result, how to participate in the various federal government programs that are available for people with disabilities. So, what is a disability? How is the federal government defining a disability? Well, this is what you have on the screen is basically their definition. It is a person with a disability is an individual with a severe and prolonged impairment in physical or mental functions. So there are 4 keywords here. Most people with mental problems or mental illnesses usually don't have a physical disability. So in our case here, we will concentrate on the mental functions. All right. Now they say that the problems have to be severe and prolonged. Severe, it's unfortunately we as caregivers or parents cannot define it. It's up to the medical practitioner to decide whether the impairment, the problem, is severe or not. So in most cases, you will have to convince your doctor or your psychologist, depending on who you talk to define the illness that your loved one has as a severe one. Most of practitioners will go along with that. So I don't think there would be a problem with that. The other keyword is prolonged. In other words, what you have to make sure is that the person with a disability will have his disability for more than 12 months, consecutive months. I don't think that's a problem as well, because for severe mental illness, it's usually for life, all right, unfortunately. There's no cure for mental illnesses, so the fact that it is prolonged is obvious. So based on their definitions, if we have somebody that has a mental illness and it's a severe mental illness, there should be no problem getting the disability tax credit. I've given here some examples of mental illnesses that would probably satisfy the federal government requirements. So you have here chronic schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major clinical depression. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the list, all right? This is just an example. Things like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, are also sometimes classified as severe. So if your loved one, or if some of you happen to have such a problem, and if you can convince a doctor that it is severe, then you are also eligible. Another one that I also sometimes mention is the borderline personality disorders. This could also become this can be accepted as a severe mental illness, which would satisfy the federal government definition. Now, what is a disability tax credit, the DTC? It's basically a non-refundable tax credit that provides access to certain government programs, and we'll go over that. Now, what are the benefits of the disability tax credit? What you have to remember is that to have access to the 3 programs I have quickly mentioned before, you have to have you have to become eligible to the disability tax credit. This is a prerequisite for any of those programs, the RDSP and the testamentary trust at progressive rates, etc. So this is the key. You have to start from there. So if you are eligible and you have been accepted as having a disability tax credit, then you can have access to the RDSPs, the federal government registered disability savings plan. You can also have access to the testamentary trust tax at progressive rates, and you also have the possibility of reducing the person with the disability income tax if he happens to be working either part-time or full-time, or if he happens to have some form of a revenue. So how to qualify for the registered disability savings plan? First, what is the RDSP? An RDSP, a registered disability savings plan, is a federal savings plan, all right? It's not provincial, it's federal, that is intended to help parents and others, caregivers, to save for the long-term financial security of a person who is eligible for the disability tax credit. So that's how the federal government views it. So who can benefit from an RDSP? First, he has to be eligible to the disability tax credit. That's the key. He must be a Canadian resident. Right? He doesn't have to be a Canadian citizen. He has to be a Canadian resident. he must be under the age of 60. And the reason for that is because the federal government has decided that if you have an RDSP plan, after you turn 60, you have to start withdrawing from that plan, right? So that's why the limit is 60. It's a bit similar to an RRSP, where once you reach the age of 70, you will force to start withdrawing from that plan. So it's a bit similar, but there are some basic differences, which we'll talk about later on. You must have a valid social insurance number, and I suspect that's very easy to obtain. Most people have it. One thing about the RDSP, which is different from an RRSP, is that you cannot have more than one RDSP at any time, all right? You only have one. You cannot go to different financial institutions and try to set up one at each. It's not possible. And we are very often asked questions about whether an RDSP is tax deductible. And the answer is, it is not. Right? It's not like an RRSP where for each contribution you make, you can deduct some income tax out of it. So the contribution to an RDSP are not tax deductible. And again, it can only be made until you turn 59, because after that, you cannot make any contribution anymore, the same as at RRSP, where you cannot make a contribution after you turn 70. For RDSP, after you turn 60, you cannot make any more contribution. So, what are the benefits of having an RDSP? Well, the difference between an RRSP and RDSP is that in the case of the RDSP, the federal government will make actual monetary contributions to the plan, all right? Which is a key difference. In our RSP, all the contributions are made by yourself, and that's it. And it's made in three possible ways. Either what they call a Canada Disability Savings Grant, a Canada Disability Savings Bond, or both, depending on your situation. So let me go over each one of those two, the A and the B. The savings grant, what it is, it's a matching contribution from the federal government that will deposit some money into your RDSP account, all right? It's a matching contribution. The contribution, the matching grant, could be 300%, 200%, or 100%, and that depends on the amount contributed and on the beneficiary family income. And the table here explains how it works. If you can see it, yes. But let me go over it carefully. This is a very important table. First, we look at the beneficiary's family income. So by family, they mean the income of the beneficiary, but also the income of a spouse or a common law partner, right? And the two together, if it is less than $89,000, then the government will make a contribution. On the first $500 that you contribute, it will contribute for every dollar that you contribute, it will contribute $3. That's the 300%. So if you make for $500, if you make a contribution of $500, the government will contribute $1,500, 3 times as much. It doesn't stop there. As long as your family income is still less than $89,000, if above the $500 you want to continue making contributions, it will let you do so up to $1,000, and up to $1,000, for every contribution that you make, it will contribute to, for every contribution of $1, the government will contribute $2. That's the 200%. Right? So if if your family income is below $89,000 and you have contributed $1,500, then the federal government will contribute $2,000 plus $1,500, that's $3,500. So if you make a contribution of $1,500, you will end up in your RDSP plan with $5,000, all right, which is very nice. If the beneficiary's family income is above $89,000, the government is still willing to contribute, but up to $1,000. And for every contribution of $1 that you make, the government will match it with $1. So this is the 100% that was mentioned before. So that's if your family income is above $89,000. Most people actually will probably contribute with the less than $89,000. In most cases, this is the situation. So that's the grant. Now, the maximum grant that the government is willing to make, as I mentioned before, is $3,500 each year, all right? So this is on a yearly basis. But they have imposed a lifetime limit, and the limit is $70,000. So if the government contributes every year to your account of $3,500, after 20 years, it will stop, all right? The grant will be paid into the RDSP until the end of the calendar year, December 31st, in which the beneficiary turns 49. What does that mean? It means that after 49, even though you still have your RDSP set up, the government will stop contributing, all right? You will understand the reason for 50 years and 60 years old later on. Now, let's talk about the disability savings bond, all right? Before it was a grant, now they talk about a bond. So what is that? The bond is basically an amount of money that the government directly deposits into an RDSP. So this is more money from the federal government. The government will contribute up to $1,000 annually for low-income Canadian with a disability. And what is meant by low income? Well, here's a table that will explain it. If the family income is less than $26,000, so we're not talking anymore about $89,000. In this case, if it is less than $26,000, then the government is willing to contribute $1,000 into your RDSP plan. If the family income is between $26,000 and $44,000, or above almost $45,000, then there's a formula which is shown on your table where you can calculate how much the government will contribute. If your family income is above $44,000, then there will be no contribution. What you have to note, however, is that the contribution from the federal government for the bond does not require you to contribute. In other words, if you're extremely poor and you cannot contribute anything to the plan, you still have access to this $1,000 from the federal government through what they call a bond. So again, I repeat, you don't have to contribute to have access to the bond. Again, for the bond, the federal government imposes a lifetime maximum of $20,000. So if every year for the bond, the government contributes $1,000, then after 20 years, you will stop, okay? Again, here for the bond, if you are 50 or more, you have no more access to the bonds, same thing as the grant. Now, how to open the RDSP? To open an RDSP, a person who qualifies to be a holder of the plan must contact a participating financial institution. So it could be a bank, could be any kind of financial institution that has had the right to offer RDSP plans. And there are a number of financial institutions in Montreal that actually offer it. So what the person that qualifies, so who is this person? First of all, this person is called the plan holder, all right? And the plan holder is the one that makes the contribution to the RDSP. So the contribution could be this $1,500 that I have mentioned previously or more, right? The financial institutions that manage the plan are called the issuers. They are the one who issues the information, the plan. If you talk to a bank or a financial institution about an RDSP in order to set up an RDSP plan, you will have to let the financial institution do all the paperwork. They are the one who will sort of negotiate with the federal government to make sure that you're eligible. Of course, the first thing they will ask you is whether you're eligible to the tax credit, the disability tax credit, and whether you are, a Canadian resident and all those requirements. But they will also do other things which I'll mention later on. So again, the plan holder is the person who can open and manage the RDSP. What do I mean by manage? Well, basically, the plan holder will tell the financial institutions how the money or the contributions that are made into the plan are going to be invested. So if you want to be safe and you want to have a safe investment, you'll probably not have as much return. If you are aggressive and you want to have a lot of return on your investment, well, you have the possibility as well. It's going to be up to the plan holder to decide. The financial institution will be there to sort of guide you, but in the final analysis, you're the one to decide how aggressive you want to be in setting up your plan. Now, if the beneficiary of the RDSP plan, the beneficiary is the one to whom the contribution will be made after he turns 60, right? If the beneficiary has reached the age of majority, so if he's 18 or more, then and if he's legally able to enter into a contract, then the plan holder can also be the beneficiary. So if the person with a mental illness has the capability of entering into a contract and the bank or the financial institution will decide, if that's the case, then the plan holder can also be the beneficiary. So that's one possibility. If the beneficiary is minor, then the plan holder can be a legal parent of the beneficiary, can be a guardian if he doesn't have any parents, a tutor or a curator of the beneficiary, or any individual who is legally authorized to act as the beneficiary. So here's a legal issue which obviously I will probably not be able to help you myself. It's something that probably you will have to ask a lawyer or a notary. Who is legally authorized to act for the beneficiary? I found out lately that even a public department, an agency or an institution that is legally authorized to act for the beneficiary can set up an RDSP plan. It's interesting. Now, if the beneficiary has reached the age of majority, but his contractual competency, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, to enter into a plan is in doubt. So if the bank or the financial institution decides that the beneficiary doesn't seem to be able to enter into a legal plan, or his capacity is in doubt, then the bank or financial institution can decide that a spouse or a common law partner or a parent of the person with a disability can actually become the plan holder. All right? That's in case it's in doubt. If the beneficiary is over 18, but is definitely not contractually competent to enter into a plan, then the plan holder will have to be legally authorized to do so. And again, you probably will have to get your lawyer or your notary involved in that case. Most financial institutions will probably go with the first one, the top one, and allow a parent or a spouse or a common law partner to actually be the plan holder. The case, the bottom case here is quite rare. Right? So how much can you contribute into an RDSP? Anyone can contribute to an RDSP. You don't have to be the plan holder. However, you have to have the agreement of the plan holder. He has to sign a permission, a written permission, that you can contribute to it. So if the plan holder happens to be a father or a mother of the beneficiary, then a mother-in-law, an uncle, or a friend can also contribute, provided he has the permission from the plan holder. All right? And there's no limit to the annual contribution that you can make. Obviously, you can make the $1,500 that I mentioned before, which will entitle you to a maximum of $4,500 from the federal government. But you can also go beyond this $1,500, but you will have no matching contributions from the federal government, but you still can put more money. If the person with the disability happens to have a very rich grandmother or grandfather who is willing to put money into the plan, then they can do so. So there is no annual contribution limit. However, and there's always a however, the lifetime contribution cannot exceed $200,000. All right? Now, one thing I'm not clear here, and this is something that if you want to set up your RDSP, you will have to ask the financial institution to explain. I'm not sure whether the $200,000 includes the revenue which you would have had as part of the plan. In other words, if you have reached $200,000 and you start getting revenue from the plan, how is that going to be treated? And I have no answer for that. You will have to ask the financial institution. Now, obviously, if you put money into a plan, eventually you'll have to start withdrawing from the plan. What you have to understand is that after you turn 60, you will have to start withdrawing. This is the same idea as the RRSP, where once you turn 70, then you have to start withdrawing from an RRSP. Right? Grants and bonds must remain in the RDSP for at least 10 years. So now that explains the difference between the government unwilling to make contributions beyond 50 and the fact that you can start withdrawing after you're 60. You can start withdrawing before you're 60, but if some of the contributions from the federal government have not been in the plan 10 years or more, then the government will want you to reimburse a portion or sometimes even the total of the government contribution. So really what they are saying is, we don't want to give you money and then you start using before the person turns a certain age. Really, this is a plan for when the person turns 60 and the relatives or the parents are not around anymore, he will have some money available so he can have a reasonably comfortable life after. The revenues on the RDSPs are not taxable, same thing as our RRSP. However, what is taxable is when you start withdrawing the money from the plan. That's taxable, all right? So if the contribution made by the federal government during the preceding 10 years must be repaid in those cases. One, if the RDSP is closed. If you decide that you want to close the RDSP, and this could happen, then the amount of money which the government has contributed less than 10 years will have to be reimbursed. If, unfortunately, the beneficiary dies, yeah, here again, then he obviously is not, doesn't have any more eligibility to the disability tax credit, so right away the RDSP plans has to be stopped. Or, for whatever reason, if the person with the disability, his situation improves, and the doctor decides that he's not really anymore eligible to the disability tax credit, then again you have to reimburse whatever has to the government has paid less than 10 years, in less than 10 years. So those are the three cases where you're going to have to be careful when you make withdrawal, and you have to be careful how the plan stops or a problem starts. Those three cases. Okay, so that's basically what I wanted to say about RDSPs. So that was the first one. The next one was the how to access testamentary trust that are taxed at progressive rates. Now, some of you may be familiar with a testamentary trust. Basically, it's some kind of a trust fund which you set up with a financial institution, and this trust fund starts acting after, based on a will from a person who set it up on his will. In other words, a person says, when I won't be around anymore, I would like my loved one to have access to some money, the fund, the trust fund, so his later years will be more, he will have enough money to live a comfortable life. And a number of parents actually do set up a testamentary trust for their loved ones. A testamentary trust is basically a tool used by families, so that's what I just mentioned, who want to leave money to loved ones with mental or physical disability. And obviously, the reason they want to do that is because the person with the disability is not able to manage those funds. So after the death of a parent, the trust can provide the beneficiary with regular income that can allow him or her to continue to live comfortably. What you have to remember is that when the trust fund starts to act, the amount of money that the person with the disability receives will be taxable. And that thing was, up to 2013, was taxed at progressive rates. Basically, if the regular amount of money that the beneficiary was receiving or is receiving is low, then the taxes are low. If the beneficiary receives a high amount of money, then the taxes will be high. So that's what we mean by progressive. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, some taxpayers use testamentary trust tax at progressive rates as a loophole to minimize taxes to the federal government. And the abuse became so great that the government decided to clamp down on that, and in 2013 in their budget they decided to stop taxing testamentary trust at progressive rates. They stopped completely. What they did is they replaced them with a fixed rate, and the fixed rate is at maximum rate. In other words, while you were paying taxes in a progressive rates before, now you're going to be paying taxes on those withdrawals at maximum rate. That's okay if you're rich, but if you're not that rich, you don't have that much money to contribute to your loved one, and so your testamentary trust doesn't have that much money, and the annual or monthly contributions that are made to the beneficiary are low, you're still taxed at maximum rates. So a number of AMI-Quebec members complained about the issue, and again they asked the Political Action Committee, or what is called now the Advocacy Committee, to do something about it, and we did. We made a big campaign to the federal government where we sent letters to various members of the Commons, to the Minister of, what's the name? I forgot his name now. The Finance Minister. And we also involve other organizations. For example, we involve an organization called FAPAM, who is basically an umbrella organization that where all the AMI-Quebec-like organizations are participating. And FAPAM has also contributed to do something with the federal government. And as a result of this, we, by the way, before I mention the result, in Quebec, the tax rates at which withdrawals would be taxed at is close to 50%. So if your loved one happens to receive contributions from a trust, a testamentary trust fund, and let's say he gets $5,000 a month, well, half of that will have to go to the federal government. So this is the reason why it turned out that it was not really acceptable for us. So fortunately, the federal government, based on the pressure that was made on it, relented and agreed to continue taxing testamentary trust at progressive rates, provided you were eligible to the disability tax credit again, all right? So that's the situation now. So if some of you want to set up a testamentary trust at progressive rates, you better get this eligibility to the disability tax credit from the federal government. Okay. The last part of the programs that I mentioned, and this is actually the reason, the original reason why becoming eligible to the disability tax credit was important. That was the case where the person with the disability happens to have a revenue. Sometimes he works part-time, or he or she works part-time, sometimes full-time, or he may have some form of revenue, something. And if he's paying taxes on those, then being eligible to the tax credit permits him to minimize those taxes, all right, reduce those taxes. And in 2013, this is an example, you could have deductions up to $7,697 from the federal government, or deductions from the provincial government of 2,545. So that's substantial, all right? You can get this money back quite quickly. So that's all I wanted to say about the taxes for the income tax. That's obvious, so that's why I didn't want to spend too much time on it. So for those three programs from the federal governments, the prerequisite is to become eligible to the disability tax credit. That's a prerequisite. So now we'll turn to that. How can we do it? Again, let me repeat the definition. The disability tax credit is a non-refundable tax credit that provides tax relief for individuals who have a severe, prolonged impairment in physical or mental functions. Right? And in our case, it's mental that we are worried about, and we want to make sure that the impairment is severe and prolonged. Severe is up to your doctor, and prolonged if it happens to be 12 months or more. So what are the requirements? How can you become eligible to the disability tax credit? The individual has one or more severe or prolonged impairments in physical or mental functions. So it's one or more. And the impairment is prolonged when it has lasted or may reasonably be expected to last for a continuous period of at least 12 months. So as you, if the doctor has decided that it's for life, then usually you will not have to renew your applications too many times. If the doctor decides that it's not for life, then the civil servants will probably ask you to renew your application once in a while. Now, the effect of the impairments can be what the government calls markedly restricted in the ability to perform one basic activity of daily living. Markedly restricted. That's another definition which is quite vague. And again, it's going to be up to the doctor or psychologist to decide whether the person with a disability is markedly restricted. There's another possibility, and this is what caused the confusion with the form that the government had made available for making the application. They also have a definition where the person could be significantly restricted in his ability to perform more than one. So if you're markedly restricted, one is enough. If you're significantly restricted, you have to have more. You have to have two or more. Now, my understanding is that significantly restricted is not as restrictive as markedly. So my take on this is try to convince your medical practitioner that your loved one has a markedly restricted problem. If you can convince him, then it's much easier to get approval for the application. Otherwise, if the doctor decides that it's not that markedly restricted, it's significantly restricted, then you're going to have more than one activity, and I'll mention them soon. In fact, here they are. Here are the activities. The first one is the one that is very important to us. It's mental functions, and there's only one activity for that, unfortunately. For physical functions, there are 8. You have feeding, speaking, hearing, eliminating, so bowel or bladder functions, walking, dressing, seeing. And the last one is life-sustaining therapy. Those are the physical activities where a person could have a problem. Most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, people with mental problems don't fit in that physical issues. But there are exceptions. So, and the last one is the so-called cumulative effects of significant restrictions. So the first one is usually for markedly restricted people, and the last one is for people who have significant restrictions, but they have more than two problems. So they have a mental problem plus maybe some of those 8 that are mentioned there. And if that's the case, then the government will accept your application. So in our case, we want to concentrate on the first one, which is the one that I have mentioned. And if that doesn't work, then I have the bottom one. But obviously, I would prefer the first one to be the one where you are markedly restricted instead of significantly restricted. So for a person with mental illness, how can we become markedly restricted? What the government says is that he must have some problems with memory. And I give here an example: inability to remember simple instructions. He's told to do something and he can't remember what he was told to do. There are a lot of other possibilities with memory, and it's up to you or your doctor to indicate what are those issues with memory. But that's what the government wants. Issues with problem solving, goal setting, and judgment. And they always say taken together. So that's the number 2. And I give as example inability to solve problems, to set and keep goals, or to make appropriate decisions and judgments. That's basically an example. There are many others, and it depends on the severity of the sickness or the mental illness that the person has. And the third one, and last one that the government has defined, is what they call adaptive functioning. In other words, can the person, as an example, the person is unable to perform self-care, clean himself, or things like this. There are other adaptive functions that are possible, and it's up to you to mention them in the application. But those 3 are the main one. Now, for those 3, a qualified practitioner, and usually a psychiatrist or a medical doctor or a psychologist, are the ones that will have to agree that those 3 problems are part of what the person with mental illness has. Now, in order to get this disability tax credit, you have to fill in the form. And the form is called the T2201. I think you have a copy here. This form is, or was, I should say was now, extremely difficult to understand. To the point where even doctors had difficulty understanding it, the form. Unfortunately, the government wants the doctor to be the one to fill in the form. Actually, there are 2 parts on the form. Part A, which has to be filled in by the person with the disability, and Part B, which has to be filled in by the medical practitioner. So if the doctor does not understand the form, then you're in trouble. He will not basically fill it in properly, and your application will be refused. And we've seen at AMI-Quebec many times this happening. I had mentioned that the government was trying to simplify the process for getting an application through them. They actually started. a week and a half ago, we found out that they came up with a new form, a new 2201 form, which is simpler. We found out last Friday, and I spent the weekend changing the whole presentation so the presentation will reflect the new form. So at least you will know how the government made some changes. They may make some additional changes to the process. I don't know about that, but at least the form has been simplified somewhat. It used to be a 10-page form. It's now a 6-page form. And here's the first page. You have in front of you the total page in order to make a presentation which is not too difficult. I have did some compression of the first page, but most of it is there. The first page is so-called Part A. This is where the person with the disability has to essentially fill in. It has 4 sections. The first section, basically the name of the person with the disability and his address and various other information that they want to have. The second one, in case the person cannot fill in that form, then if he has a legal representative, then that legal representative can actually fill in the second part, Part 2. In Part 3, they ask you whether you want to agree or not to provide this information to the CRA, the Revenue Service, the Federal Revenue Service, so that if your application is accepted and the person with the disability has paid income tax in the past, they are willing to go back and reimburse you because now you have the disability and you can prove that the disability started earlier than when you made the application. All right? So I would say it's a good idea to say yes, but if some of you never had, if the person with the disability never had an income, then it probably doesn't make any difference. You can do either one. The last part, section 4, it has to be signed, and I have to admit that this sometimes is a problem. Some people with disability don't want to sign the form. So, some of them claim that they're not sick, and as a result, why should they apply for disability? They are not disabled. This is a problem. And this is a problem I cannot solve for you. This is something which you will have to solve with you and the person you represent, and see what you can do. Some persuasion. What might work is when the person finds out that if he gets this disability tax credit and he sets up an RDSP, then the government will give him money. And that usually changes the picture. Yeah. So this is an argument which you can use. But obviously, there has to be a signature there. Either the person with the disability or the legal representative. Page 2 is very similar to the previous 2201 form. They just condensed it. And here, this is the Part B. This is the part where the government, not the government, where the doctor, the medical practitioner has to fill in. And the first, page 2 is basically physical impairments. So you just check not applicable in all cases, unless your loved one has a physical impairment. But as I said before, in 95% of the case, it doesn't happen. And the reason why it's also good to make sure that you tick not applicable is because if you don't, then the government expects you to fill in some of that, and then if you don't fill it in because you know you're not, then you have a problem. And many people were turned down in their applications just because of that. All right. So that's page 2. Page 3 is very similar for the first 3 parts, essentially eliminating, feeding, and dressing. So it's the same as page 2. You just tick not applicable. The last part is the part that we are interested in. And in this one, you don't tick not applicable, obviously. You better not. So this is the part where you have to give some information. Well, actually, your doctor has to give some information. And basically, you have to say whether the problem is markedly restricted. Remember that? Markedly restricted. So you have to convince the doctor that your loved one is markedly restricted, and he will tick yes. And he will give the date where the problem started. So in this case, I mentioned 2005, but obviously it could be any date. Page 4 is the same as page 2. It's all not applicable. And the reason I said not applicable for both is because I always suggest not to untick the cumulative effect where you have to have 2 impairments or more. All right? So I prefer to say not applicable, and hope that the medical practitioner will be convinced that your person is markedly restricted. All right? Page 9. Page 5, because in the previous form it was page 9. Page 5, you have to give a list of all the problems which your loved one is facing. They are basically the symptoms. All right? So I'm going to give you an example. And the example is based on schizophrenia because that's the one I'm very familiar with. But obviously, if it's a different problem, like I said, it could be bipolar disorder, clinical depression, or it could be OCD, or it could be borderline personality disorder. It could be anything. Then the list that you're going to give is going to be different. And even if your loved one suffers from schizophrenia, even there's a whole spectrum of problems, and some are applicable and some are not applicable. You have those so-called, what do they call them? Negative symptoms, very good, thank you. Negative symptoms or positive symptoms. And some people with schizophrenia will not have positive symptoms, they will have only negative, or some will have both, and some will have the reverse. So I just want to make sure that you understand that. So here's the example I give, and this is for schizophrenia. And again, I mentioned that it could be anything, all right? I will let you read it. I don't want to read it for you. You'll have a chance to do so later on, or in the future if you make it the application. What I want to say is that the bottom part, your doctor will have to tick yes if the illness is prolonged, which is the case for most severe mental illnesses, and he will have to tick no to indicate that he doesn't foresee in the future that there is a chance of cure for the problem. All right. If your doctor wants to tick yes, he's going to have to give a date where he thinks that there's going to be a cure. Okay, I don't think any doctor would probably want to do that, but you never know. So that's the page 5, and I mentioned where you have to tick yes and where you have to tick no there. All right, and then the last page, page 6. This is where the practitioner has to identify himself. So his name, telephone numbers, address, and various other information is requested. He has to tick whether he's a medical doctor or a psychologist. Both are accepted for mental illnesses. So here I ticked medical doctor, but it's possible that the person with the disability is actually talking to a psychologist. It could happen. So that's what I mean here. So make sure that, oh yes, the reason for the arrow there, the top arrow, is because the doctor has to say how long he's been treating the patient. So here I give an example from 2002 to 2015. In my own case, it started in 1992 and he's still doing it. So it's a long time, but sometimes it's recent. I know a lot of people with mental illnesses who have changed practitioners on a regular basis because they were not being treated properly or they could not get along with the other person. But whoever fills in the application, the doctor or the psychologist, they have to indicate how long they've been treating the person. And they have also to tick that they have a file where all the information they have provided on the application is available. All right? The reason why this is important is because sometimes when you make the application, civil servants will call the doctor and he will have to say, yeah, yes, I have a file on him, and yes, those problems are existent. On the bottom of page 9, the federal government gives you some information on how to fill it in. By the way, if you go to their website, they also have a big file on detailed information on how to fill in the T2201 form. So if you happen to have a computer and you can go to their site, you will see it there. It's very nicely presented. They also give you at the bottom of that page the address where to send the application, depending on where you live. So if you live in the Montreal area, you have to send it to the Shawinigan address. So again, you have to send the form to the federal government at the required address. Now, it is extremely important that you keep a copy of the form. All right? There are many reasons for that. The form is, as I mentioned, is not easy to understand. And there are some issues with whether you're markedly or significantly restricted, and so it's a bit vague. And they ask you to list all the impairments. By the way, something I forgot to mention, in the previous form, they asked for the diagnosis. They don't ask this time. Probably people complained, all right? They don't want to show the diagnosis, but they are willing to show the problems. So that's, I think, a good thing. But you have to make sure that all the problems, the impairments that your loved one experiences are there, all right? And if for any reason your application is turned down, what they will do, they send you a letter explaining to you why they turned down the application, and it happens regularly. And if you don't have a copy to see where you fail to convince them, then you're in trouble. You're going to have to redo the whole process. If you have a copy and you can convince your doctor that, look, I mean, this is why they complained, do you mind modifying the form and adding information, then you will have a chance to be reviewed and to be accepted. And this, I know for a fact, has happened to some of our members. So keep a copy. Also, most medical practitioners don't have the time. They are busy people. They don't have the time to investigate how to fill in the form, right? So if they miss, they don't essentially write the proper things there because they did not understand it, and they don't have a copy of what they have sent, the government will turn down and they will send them also a copy of the reason why they turn it down. If they don't have a copy of what they sent, then they won't understand what happened. Plus, while they are studying the application, the federal government will sometime call the medical practitioner and said, and if the medical practitioner getting the call doesn't have a copy of what he has sent, then they will not understand each other and the application will be turned down. So make sure you keep a copy and the medical practitioner keeps a copy of the application. Now, to fix the problem of possibly a medical practitioner not filling in the form properly, we suggest a way around it. All right. What we say to the people we talk to is, go to the medical practitioners with two versions of the form. The first version, signed by the person with the disability, but essentially part A completed, and part B blank. That's the first form. And the second one that you bring along with you is one that is fully filled in, except for the last page where you have the name of the doctor and his signature. So if the doctor agrees with the second one, in other words, he reads what you have ticked, yes, no, not applicable, a list of all the impairments and so on, and if he agrees, he'll be very happy. He doesn't have much time to spend on filling in the form. He will write his name and address and so on, and you get a copy of that, you give him a copy, you get a copy, and you send the whole thing, and that's it. Now, if he does not agree with what you have written on the form, then he has the first one, the blank one, where he can modify according to what he feels is the right thing. Usually, if you can persuade the doctors that the second one is good, your chances of getting accepted is good. If he doesn't agree to some of the things, make sure that somehow it's still markedly restricted, all right? It's important. But whatever form you finally send, you keep copies of that. So that's basically what I wanted to explain to you tonight. My presentation is complete. If you have any questions, now is the time to raise them. And please, when you have questions, make them short, all right? Because we plan to put some of the questions as part of the presentation on our video, which is going to be on our website. So if the question is too long, it probably won't show up in the video. Yes?
Yeah, does the doctor or psychologist send the document himself or herself to Revenue Canada, or do they give it back to us to send?
I've seen both. The question was, is the doctor himself sending the form, or is it the person with the disability sending the form? And my reading is it depends on the doctor. Some doctors want to send the form themselves, but make sure that you ask them a copy of it. Some doctors will let you send it. He will sign the form and say, okay, you can send it now. So that's basically it. So does that answer your question?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Any other question? Yes?
You're talking about testamentary trust, and I'm not quite clear on that. Is that Henson Trust come under that?
It's very similar.
And do the same tax regulations apply to a Henson Trust?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
So the question was whether other type of trust will be taxed at fixed rate or not. My reading is that that's the case. They're essentially trying to get around the loopholes. As long as you satisfy as long as you have the disability tax credit, yes, I forgot the word. As long as you have that, you will be taxed at progressive rates. In any case, you're going to have to talk to a lawyer or notary to do that, to set it up. And not too many notaries or lawyers are familiar with those things. I better warn you. I've had to talk to a number of them. One of them told me that I'm not competent enough to handle that. They sent me to a specialist, and even the specialist wasn't aware that RDSP plans were available, all right? So you have to talk to them, and they will tell you whether it's possible or not. Okay. Yes?
I'm 62, and I was wondering, do some of these things apply retroactively? I've been on welfare since 1994 because of major depression.
Okay. The question is whether, if you're above 60, whether it's retroactive. I suspect it's not, because it depends what you're asking. If you're asking about the RDSP, is that your question? Is it about RDSP? As you know, you cannot have a plan anymore after you turn 60. So you cannot set up an RDSP plan after you're 60. So that that treats that issue. On the other hand, if you or somebody else sets up a testamentary trust and you're the beneficiary, then yeah, you can do that. It doesn't matter if you're over 60 or not. The 60 year of age issue is only for RDSPs. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
The disability tax credit, can that be retroactive?
Okay, if you had a revenue, all right, if for example you were working for, let's say, 3 or 4 years part-time, or if somehow you managed to get a revenue from whatever source, and you did pay income tax on it, right? And you got the disability tax credit later on, and on the first page of the T2201 form, you tick that you want this information to be received by the Revenue Service, then they probably will look at your file and see that, yeah, you had that problem during the time that you paid this income tax, and then they are willing to review that and reimburse you for whatever excess income tax you have paid. It's the first time we received that form. It's the first time that we see this on the form, so I don't have any kind of history on that. But I would suggest that if you do get this disability tax credit, that you apply for that. But make sure you had a revenue and that you pay income tax on that revenue. Otherwise, they will not consider it. Remember, they define it as non-refundable disability tax credit. It's non-refundable. In other words, it's only in the case where you paid excess taxes that they're willing to refund. But they will not refund you on the disability tax credit. Yeah. Any other question? Yes?
In regards to the RDSP, from what I'm reading, the plan holder is separate from the beneficiary unless the beneficiary sets it up themselves.
Correct. Correct.
What happens when the plan holder, if and when the plan holder dies and it's not the beneficiary?
Well, there's no problem. What you have to do is you have to make sure that the plan holder can have somebody to replace him. And this is something that you probably have to negotiate with the financial institution. You could, for example, indicate in your will that my loved one has an RDSP plan, and you want to make sure that if I die, well, everybody dies, but when I die, that another person can can replace me as the plan holder. It's something you have to talk with the financial institution. But what I have mentioned before is not if the plan holder dies, if the beneficiary dies, because the disability tax credit is with the beneficiary, not the plan holder.
But
right.
The management of the funds
right.
by the plan holder should change if the person.
You're right, and this is something you have to discuss with the financial institution. Okay. Any other question? Okay, well, thank you very much for attending this. I hope this has helped you in any way. You will see a copy of that video eventually in AMI-Quebec's website, and a copy of the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation. So you will have, if you start making applications for tax credit, for the RDSP and so on, you will be helped by this video and the presentation. Thank you very much, and good evening.
Thank you.